d4, d5, c4, c6, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, e6, g3, knight bd7, bishop g2, bishop e7, castle kingside, castle kingside, b3, b6, bishop b2, a5, e4, bishop a6, knight e5, rook c8, rook e1, d takes c4, knight takes c4, bishop takes c4, b takes c4, e5, knight e2, bishop b4, rook f1, rook e8, queen c2, queen e7, c5, e takes d4, c takes b6, c5, a3, knight takes b6, a takes b4, a takes b4, knight f4, queen d6, rook fd1, knight bd7, rook ac1, queen a6, knight d3, h5, h3, b3, queen c4, queen takes c4, rook takes c4, knight takes e4, bishop takes d4, knight b6, rook takes c5, knight takes c5, knight takes c5, b2, knight d3, knight c4, knight takes b2, rook ed8, bishop c3, knight takes b2, rook takes d8 check, rook takes d8, bishop takes b2, rook d1 check, bishop f1, rook b1, bishop d4, rook d1, bishop e3, rook a1, king g2, rook a5, king f3, rook f5 check, king e4, rook a5, bishop c4, rook a4, king d5, rook a1, king d6, king f8, bishop c5, rook d1 check, king c6 check, king g8, bishop d5, rook d3, Bishop e4. Rook d2. Bishop d5. Rook d3. Bishop e3. g6. King d6. King g7. King e5. Rook d1. g4. H takes g4. H takes g4. Rook d3. Bishop g5. Rook d1. Bishop f6 check. King f8. King d6. Rook d2. f3. Rook d1. Bishop c3. Rook d3. Bishop e5. Rook d1. f4. Rook g1. g5. Rook d1. King c6. Rook d2. Bishop d6 check. King g7. Bishop b3. Rook d3. Bishop c4. Rook d1. King d7. Rook d4. Bishop b5. f6. King e6. Rook e4 check. King d5. Rook e1. G takes f6 check. King takes f6. Bishop e5 check. King e7. Bishop d3. King f7. Bishop c4. King e7. King d4. Rook a1. Bishop d3. King f7. King d5. Rook d1. King e4. Rook e1 check. King d4. Rook d1. Bishop c7. King e7. King e3. Rook c1. Bishop b6. Rook g1. King f3. Rook c1. King g4. Rook c3. Bishop e4. King f7. Bishop d5 check. King e7. Bishop a5. Rook c1. Bishop b6. Rook d1. Bishop f3. Rook f1. Bishop g2. Rook b1. Bishop c5 check. King f7. Bishop e4. Rook e1. Bishop d5, check. King g7. Bishop f3. Rook c1. Bishop e3. Rook b1. Bishop d4, check. King h6. Bishop c5. King g7. Bishop e2. Rook c1. Bishop e3. Rook e1. Bishop d4, check. King h6. Bishop f3. Rook b1. Bishop f6. Rook g1, check. King h4. Rook b1. Bishop g5, check. King g7. King g3. Rook b3. King f2. Rook a3. King e2. Rook b3. Bishop e4. Rook a3. Bishop d3. Rook b3. King e3. Rook b4. Bishop e4. Rook a4. Bishop d5. Rook b4. King d3. Rook a4. Bishop c4. Rook a1. King d4. Rook e1. King d5. Rook d1, check. King e5. Rook e1, check. King d6. Rook d1, check.